Hello, my name is Hannah Adams. I'm a 3L at Northeastern Law, and as you know, if you have been watching my previous video blog posts, a couple weeks ago I went to Geneva, Switzerland as part of the civil society delegation at the review of the U.S. by the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, or CERD. I spent a week with other organizers and advocates from around the country lobbying the committee on all the ways we felt that the United States was not in compliance with its obligations under the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. Specifically, I was lobbying the committee on the fact that the U.S. Doesn't recognize right to counsel in civil cases, and this results in negative outcomes that disproportionately impact people of color in America. On Friday, this just a couple days ago, the committee came out with its concluding observations, which represents its analysis of the places where the U.S. has failed to meet its obligations under the treaty and recommendations for how the United States should remedy the issues the committee has identified. We were very excited to see that the issue of access to justice in civil cases got a strong concluding observation. I've attached or I've linked to it in this post, but just to give you a sense of what it says, in paragraph 23, titled Access to Legal Aid, the committee says that it reiterates its concern at the lack of a generally recognized right to counsel in civil proceedings, which disproportionately affects indigent persons belonging to racial and ethnic minorities to seek an effective remedy in matters such as evictions, foreclosures, domestic violence, discrimination in employment, termination of subsistence income or medical assistance, loss of child custody, and deportation. And then the committee goes on to recommend quote, that the state party allocates sufficient resources to ensure effective access to legal representation for indigent persons belonging to racial and ethnic minorities in civil proceedings, particularly with regard to proceedings that have serious consequences for their security and stability, such as evictions, foreclosures, domestic violence, discrimination in employment, termination of subsistence income or medical assistance, loss of child custody, and deportation proceedings. In addition to that, in the section on immigration, the committee specifically recommended that the U.S. government provide for legal representation in all immigration-related matters, including deportation proceedings. So that's all very exciting. I wanted to flag one other piece, which is that the committee expressed concern about the definition of racial discrimination used in federal and state legislation in the United States, saying that it is not in line with the definition of racial discrimination under the convention. Under CERD, racial discrimination includes practices which have a discriminatory effect, even if the purpose or intent is not discriminatory. And as you probably know, under U.S. 14th Amendment jurisprudence, you have to prove intent. So that's a big limitation on enforcement of civil rights in the United States. So I wanted to share this with you because I'm really excited about exploring ways that we can use these concluding observations, which do represent recommendations from an international human rights body, in our domestic advocacy. I think it's really powerful to be able to say that access to justice, for example, is not just a domestic legal issue, it's not just a federal budget issue, it's not just a state bar association issue, it's actually an international human rights issue. That the lack of recognized right to counsel in civil cases, it's not just unfair or unethical or discriminatory and deeply damaging to our society, but it actually violates an international human rights treaty that the United States has signed on to. I think that resonates, and I hope that we can use some of this language from the CERD committee to hold our government accountable and to make lasting change. So thanks for tuning in to my video blog, and I hope you'll have an opportunity to look over the concluding observations. They're pretty interesting and a powerful statement on U.S. compliance with its international human rights obligations.